what do they do? Well, right now, the internet isn't all that smart. It's a dumb machine. So I'm going to explore that with you because there are aspects of smartness and the way we think that are a little bit unusual. If the person at the side of you isn't having a little giggle, just nudge them and explain this one to them. Probably means they're not married or something. But the way men and women think is subtly different for various reasons. So if I take the hand of a woman and the forearm of a woman, I will find that the nerve endings are much more dense than a man. If I take the eye of a woman, you find that the central focal region is more concentrated than man. But if I look at a man's outer focal region, I'll find that it's more intense than a woman. So a man can see a sideward attack coming far quicker than a woman, but a woman is more capable of doing things that need fine, concentrated work. So the way we think is interesting. So when we put teams together, it's important to have men, women, and many different disciplines so that we get a really good kludge of capability. What I'm interested in is augmenting that capability with the intelligences that machines might be able to bring to us, i.e. the chess-playing machines that don't play like us are kind of important in this game. So, a view of technology. My grandfather, I can remember him saying that he did actually say this when he was a young man. Men will never fly, that's what he said. My father used to say, man will never walk on the moon, had to eat his words. My generation has said all of these things. And all of those statements are not worth a light. They're all born out of ignorance and fear and those kinds of things. And you just forget them. I never say never. As we advance, our view changes and our capabilities accelerate. So let's go back to reality for a moment. This chaotic pattern on the left, on the right-hand side is a diagram. Just think of your own lives and say, if I'm in business, how many parameters do I have to take into account to make a business decision? It is quite the practice to look at a problem that's got 100 parameters, pick the 3 or 4 biggest parameters, do an approximate model, get an answer and go with it. And that works great when things are well behaved and reasonably linear. But it's lethal when things are nonlinear, because we're up against the butterfly wings syndrome, if you like. The small things, the inconsequential things, tend to suddenly become important. So that kind of thinking becomes lethal. How many people have trouble finding stuff on the net? Yeah, gee. Don't you just love it when Google comes back and says there are 9,321,000 references under your heading? Here are the first 10. I mean, that's really useful. Not. It's kind of difficult. We've got acres and acres of information, and finding it is now a problem. How many people search for YouTube stuff but find that the really good stuff they find is because somebody emailed them and said, have you seen this? Yeah, the human network is quite remarkable. We find something interesting, tell everybody, because we know how hard it is to find. How many people have got 100 TV channels? Come on, everybody must have 100 TV channels. I discovered the other day we got access to well over 1,000. I put this satellite dish up and just fiddle around a bit, and there's over 1,000 channels, which is cool because I don't watch much TV. But you know, hey, I'm an engineer. I've got to have 1,000 channels. But it's a sort of interesting thing. You know, all this stuff is out there, but the big deal now is finding something that's worth watching. Everybody know about Google's moonshot, which is to grab every book on the planet, scan it in, and make it searchable on the web. They're taking in, right now, 10,000 books a week and scanning them in. 10,000 a week. They're going to be at it for quite some time. What is interesting with the program is they will approach you, if you approach them in an order and say, I didn't give you permission, they just say, see you in court. We'll give you some money. And they're just intent on scanning everything in. This is great. If we don't scan anything in, everything in, we're going to have some real tragedies, like the loss of all the medieval documents when we've had fires in York and other cathedrals. So it's imperative that we get the stuff. So they're actually working through the Bodleian Library, for example, which is, I thought was really a cool effort. Here's an instance. I thought I would find out how society feels about these topics. And so I searched artificial intelligence and found nearly 66 million references. Artificial life, 32 million references, which is kind of interesting. There's a lot of stuff out there. I then started to think about my own life, existence, the way we are, and the way we were. So if I go back 200 years, I could have stood before you as an eminent scientist and literary author at the same time, and an artist perhaps. So last week I happened to be in Rome, and I was wandering around there, and you look at it and you think, Michelangelo did a great job. He wouldn't survive today because he'd be put into a silo. He could not be an artist, an anatomist, he couldn't be an engineer, and he couldn't be a philosopher, and he couldn't be a painter, and he couldn't be a sculptor all at the same time. They put him into a silo. But his power came from, if you look at his paintings and you look at his sculpture, the reason they're so good is he spent time taking human beings to pieces to see how they were put together so that he could understand how to model them. So I take this view that, you know, I could have been the font of all knowledge. Right now, I know not a lot, and I know less every day. So my sort of view is that when I did my PhD, I was like a delta function. I knew an infinite amount about nothing, and as I became older, I sort of flipped through 90 degrees and suddenly discovered that I knew nothing about an infinite amount. You know, I became like a thin layer of ice on a vast sea of knowledge. But the clever trick, if you can maintain it, is to retain the skill to be able to drill down in any area and to understand for that period that you need to understand. One of my observations of society is this group of youngsters that are now coming up are the most networked and the most collaborative of all human beings to date. No one in the past has communicated or collaborated in the way that they do, and it's extremely powerful because you can try and solve a problem from first principles, or you can go onto the net and say, has anybody had this problem? And somebody comes hurtling out of the mist and you get a solution and away you go. So it's like having a huge college at your disposal. So my mission in life is to become the font of all knowledge through technology.